This show rolling. I am delighted, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce my friend, Rich Batchelor. He's been successful delivering change for over 25 years. I actually found his picture online in the ACMP directory, and I was so impressed with how cool he was that I decided I wanted to be friends with him. Seriously. His consulting practice has seen him work with organizations across all parts of the globe. His legacy includes developing the change delivery model for UK government and being a founding member of ACMP. He's someone to whom we are speaking, AKA. He has a master's in change management and is a certified Lego serious play facilitator and workshop designer. Is that too cool or what? I'm all a flutter. Flutter, that's the word. He is also certified in project management and has a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, HR professionalism accreditation, and coaching and counseling and psychotherapy certifications. So, you know.
Therapy begins later.
You're having some issues. Here's the guy to go talk to. He has developed a number of change-focused workshops and delivers these in person and virtually. His Certified Change Agent program is so incredibly awesome. I literally took it last June, and I am now a certified change agent. Applause.
And she passed first time.
Yeah. He said actually did really well. Very cool. He's been enabling individuals to be an advocate for change and change working with their own dynamic organizational environment. Interest in sharing is often opinionated, and thoughts across the world has led him to give presentations to a wide range of audiences. And oh, by golly, we are so fortunate to have him here today. And I'm delighted to introduce my friend, my colleague, my mentor, the one, the only, Rich Batchelor.
Wow. Follow that. Okay, so let's have a look around the room. Yeah, a few familiar faces, a few not so familiar faces. A few faces that may never want to be familiar with me after this session. That's okay, I can deal with that. So I've got some bad news, some good news, and some middling news to begin with. The bad news I'm going to begin with, this session slot is the midpoint of the conference. From now on, there's less conference to go than there's been. You can look at that whichever way you want. I think it's bad because it means I've got less learning to go. But some people might be, yeah, that's good. That's neither to the end, neither to my cocktails at the end. That's cool. My good news is that you are going to have an experience with this session that gives you two really cool takeaways based on an actual case study of a client actually that I'm still working with, but I'll talk mainly about the experience I had with this. The middling news is that this is probably the laziest presentation you're going to have the whole time you're here, because most of this work is done by you, not me. I actually only have 20 slides on my slide deck, because I'm kind of not really a great one for PowerPoints anyway. And that includes the ones like this slide. And the ones at the end that say, here's all my details, contact me. So you can imagine it's not going to have a lot of stuff. But my slide deck is always my project plan to get me through this, because otherwise I go off rambling. I go off onto tangents. So it's the way of keeping me focused when I do a talk and a presentation. So let's see. We're going to do coaching the culture right out of the culture. So if you're looking for something about coaching, expecting something about culture and how the two connect, you're in the right place. If you're looking for something on data analytics, wrong room. Objectives. All right. I've made a point of putting these objectives up there because they may not become totally obvious. The first objective is we're going to have one activity you're going to do about understanding using a simple model of organizational health. And then the second piece you're going to do is some practice on leadership coaching. Using my own, I'm going to use the word twisted. I kind of like the idea of twisted. Approach to the GROW model. And all of this is going to be wrapped up around a case study of an actual client that I had. Client I'm not so active with as I was, but they're a fun client. This is the story I'm going to talk to you about. The story of a client. A company, a manufacturing company, that in 2014 was owned and run by the patriarch of a family. He was 85 years old in 2014 and thought it was about time he retired. And the company was doing okay. It was ticking over. It had a couple of sites. It was creating stuff. But he decided it was time for his sons to take on the business. So his sons took on the business and they started to grow it. And by golly, did they grow it. This company went between 2014 to 2016 from 300 staff to 600 staff, doubled in size. It went from 2 locations to 7 locations. And they didn't have a clue what they were doing. They openly admitted that to me when I first had a conversation with them. We've just grown, not through any plans, not through any preparation. It was just pure luck. But they kind of realized that this new company that they were evolving, they were developing, and they hoped to grow even further, needed some help with structure, design, and whereas the previous culture had been all about the old man telling everybody exactly what they did, and literally their culture was command and control, extreme. He would walk through the floor of the factory, and it was like the parting of the Red Sea, because everybody ran to hide. But the sons that came in wanted to get away from that approach. They really wanted to get to one of a more empowered, enabling, engaged setup. But with so many staff increases, they realized that they needed to actually put in place some more management. So from this sort of flat structure, they tried to create this in about 2 weeks. Needless to say, it didn't go according to plan. There were some good things, there were some bad things about it. But the good thing was that they were recognizing the need that more people needed more support. To be totally frank with you, the previous setup, the command and control setup, was all about telling everybody what to do. Nobody took direction from anybody other than the old man in charge, and that was the way it was going to be. It was truly about, when somebody shouted, they asked, "How high do you want me to jump?" It was very, very directional. So I came into this company through a referral, as usually happens with me. Somebody goes in my network and says, "I've heard about this really crappy company culture. I think you'd enjoy playing with them, because I have this kind of attraction to challenges." And they recommended I go in and do some coaching, support, general, assist them to understand what they needed to create as an organization. So I went in, I had a lot of conversations. I met the 2 brothers that were now running the show, and kind of interesting dynamic between them, because the older brother was actually almost 20 years older than the younger brother, who was the other one, and kept on reminding us that the younger brother was a mistake in the family, and all this sort of conversation. You know, anybody who's worked in family companies knows all these things come out on the table. But what happened was that they said, "We're making mistakes. We're failing. We need help." And whether you call it 10, 12, 15, or 30-step programs, that admission that they were not doing it right was their first step. So I started to work with them. And I did lots of things with them. But the first thing I did is what I'm going to get you to do as your first exercise. I wanted to find out the health of the organization. So hopefully, you've all got a black and white document there with a nice kind of picture Great stuff. Anybody who hasn't, wave their hands madly in the air and we'll get them to you. Oh, there's a little click here. One over there. The ones over here, if you want to come, you can actually collect your own if it's easier from here, but we'll get some stuff to you. I'll talk through this before I get you to do the exercise anyway. So this is a model, and what you have there is a model that I use to represent the shape of the health of an organization. Now, I used a particular set of questions that generated responses. I'm going to get you to do it in the most simplest fashion, called making numbers up. Okay? It'll work. It's the principle of this, because you can use this to create any sort of indicators for anything behind you. You can use this for change readiness assessments. You can use this to actually assess the impact of a change. You can do it as a learning needs assessment, all sorts of stuff. It's up to you how you want to use it. The principle of this model is that this represents all the key elements of an organization. The internal drivers leading to what the outside world sees of that organization on the outside of the circle. And then the kind of connector pieces that go around it. There's 8 lines that go with this that you can score those particular axes on. So that's what I developed and did. These 8 axes were scored. So I'm going to get you to do this exercise, to think of an organization that you're either working with at the moment, or an organization that you want to work with, or you have worked with maybe. And on the actual handout template you've got there, you'll see right at the bottom of it, there's these boxes that are shown on the left of this. You actually work from the right to the left, filling in numbers on these boxes. You're going to score each of these factors, each of these axes. I'll go back to help you, if this will work. Yay! I love it when technology works for me. Where is it actually at the moment on these? Go through, take 2 minutes to quickly score by instinct, where are they at? If you're doing a cultural assessment, think about it in terms of where is their culture of the organization. If you're doing this as a change readiness assessment, think about it as where is their change readiness levels. And think about this in terms of the 8 factors. Why are they doing things? Do they get why they are doing things? Do they understand why they exist? The strategy. Do they actually understand what they actually do? Their operations. Do they know who does it? Does everybody know who does it? Does everybody know how things are done? Function. Function is different to operations. A lot of people get those two confused. And then the drivers to the outside world. How is their ambition driving their vision and mission? Working with that strategy and function to the outside world. How is their learning and development being seen? What about their values of perceived culture? And I use the word perceived culture because it may not be actual culture. It may be the way they perceive themselves. And what about delivering? What about KPIs, results, outputs, those activities? So just take a moment and first of all score down the right-hand column out of 10 against each of those. You can do 0 if you want to. It's okay. Just take 2 minutes to quickly do a scoring. Think about it from the focus of culture if that's what you're particularly interested in. But you could also use this from a change readiness, change acceptability, change whatever you want to use it for. 10 is the top, the best, the most amazing, wonderful. 0 is the crappiest, awful, most, we don't really get this at all. We have no idea what's going on in this space, and nobody in the organization does either. Don't overthink it. This is just an example for now. I'll make sure you can get access to this template afterwards so you can use it as many times as you want to in the future. I'm not being protective or possessive about it. I just didn't put it on the app because I didn't want to confuse people before I explained it. One more minute. Quickly, get some scores down there. Do the actual column first. Where are they actually at? Okay. Before you do the needs column, it's picture drawing time. So on those 8 axes on your template, there's actually 10 blip points going out. So you can score on each one of those axes where you are on the actual thing. This is your first exercise. I don't want you to think about need yet or that column. I'm doing actual first. Mark, count out, so 0 would be right at the center. 1, 2, 3, 4, right the way out to 10 at the far side. 10 is at the limit. Mark all those axes with the scores, and then in your best, most concentrated penmanship, join the dots up into what is called an octahedron. It's not an octagon. CJ didn't mention, my undergrad was in mathematics, so I get a bit geeky about explaining these things. An octahedron is a flat 8-sided space. An octagon is a 3-dimensional 8-sided. Just random pieces of information for you. And when you've actually joined them all up, just shade them in with your pen or your pencil, so that you're creating a solid shape in the middle. That shape you've colored in the center is actually your current state shape. That's the shape of the organization currently. Might look a bit weird. Don't worry. I'll actually share with you the outcome I had when I did this with the actual company I did it with. But now you've done the actual, where do they need to be? Same exercise. Go through that column on need, score them, mark it on the actual 8-axis diagram at the top, but this time, just join up the line. Make it a line. This is where you want to get to. You can do it for whatever time you're working in. You know, if you want to say that this is a particular change event that's going to take 9 months, you want to say, where do we want to be in 9 months? If you want to say, this is our 5-year strategic plan, where do you want to be in 5 years? This is a tool that you can play with and use to work out the answer to where you want to go to. Yes?
Why would the need be anything other than 10?
Because not every organization needs these places to be at 10. If you're a manufacturing business, your primary focus would be on operations, function, delivery. You maybe need a good quality element on some of those others. But don't confuse need with like to have. Because everybody would like to be 10 out of 10. Do you need to be 10 out of 10 on all of these? Does this organization truly need to be 10 out of 10 on these? If you really think about it, depending on the focus of an organization, they may well not have 6 or 7 being anything above 6 or 7 on some of those components. Give you typical examples of this when I've done this work. Manufacturing, production tends to be very heavy towards the bottom right corner, less heavy towards the top left corner. You have a consulting company, they tend to be heavy on the left side, less so on the right side. It's what they need, not what you would ideally like in utopia. Because I hate to tell you this, you're not going to get there. Yeah. Well, let's not get caught up in the 0.999996. When we deal with change, we never get 0.99996%. We maybe get 90% if we're lucky. Yes. Yes, I've often had the reverse. I particularly find that has happened where I've worked with companies that they tend to have too much in the learning and development than what they actually need. They kind of overkill on learning and development, thinking that that's going to drag everything else along. So what you should have is something that looks a little bit like this. Maybe not quite this shape. This is actually the shape that I had of the organization I did and where they needed to be. They did need to be a 10 in the operational delivery because they were manufacturing. You know, everything hung on getting the product out of the door. So that's where they needed to be. But actually, perceived culture was about where they needed to be. Not saying it was the right culture, but their perception of it was pretty spot on. It was just that they knew it was crap. But this is a really interesting way of visualizing current to future state of anything. Rather than getting caught up in that 24-page report document that gets thrown on the top shelf, you can get an image that just says, okay, the blue bit in the middle is your current state. The red line is where you want to go. Where's the biggest gaps that we need to work on? Yeah.
I assume there's always a 10 in the need.
No. No, that's what I was just explaining.
Well, not everything needs to be 10.
There's usually one key driver, 1 or 2 10s that normally come up with most organizations, yeah. As I say, typically, if you're like a training company, you might end up with something around the learning and development as a 10. If you're somebody who does a lot of work in sort of people engagement, that type of stuff, you might be 10s around the top left corner. Depends where you are. So this was what I had from this company to deal with. Lots of gaps. Now, I could have... Yes, sorry. Okay. Yeah, so I'll just backtrack a little bit on that. So you just did this as a very quick and dirty exercise. What I would do and what I did in the organization behind this was much like an employee engagement survey. I had a whole set of 60 questions that went out to the organization that they answered that actually sat behind this to give the results. It actually allowed me, this was the whole organization, I was actually able to drive out a few different shapes for different divisions as well, based on the outcome of this stuff. It's more of the representative as a visual format, rather than like engagement surveys that have these bar chart, stupid things that nobody understands and all this sort of thing that kind of was getting away from that. So you will have that set, but you can create those questions to suit the particular drive you need to focus on. So if you're looking at change readiness, say, you may be wanting to do your set of questions that talk to change readiness. The scores that people give will go into a data set that can actually generate this as a... Yeah, yeah. But what I always do and what I always recommend to people is if you're doing anything that asks people to assess current state versus where they want to be, don't ask those two questions next to each other. Keep them separate. Go through your 20 questions on current state, then your 20 questions on future state. Otherwise, all anybody does is they go, well, I scored that 6, so I'll score this 7. I'll score that 5, I'll score this 6. And they just go into mind-numb responses. Yeah, I better make it look a bit better. That type of stuff. Sorry, so I apologize, I didn't explain that. There's a whole set, but that's where you can create your own set of questions behind this to drive the actual results you want to go this. I actually spent probably about 3 afternoons with the client confirming the questions that were going to go out to them. I have a whole range of different pools of questions, as I suppose most of us have in our various toolboxes. And I kind of went through, this is what this one will drive to, this, and getting them to make sure, because they wanted some things that use their terminology and the wording and things like that as well. You're welcome. So I could have done a whole change management activity, but these people were so far away from any sort of, what's the word I want to look for here? Strength of change management planning, that I had to go a little bit softly on them and go more of the coaxing and influencing style. So I chose to take a coaching approach. And the key thing about this was because we were looking at how bad the culture was, how it was working. And these are my 6 pieces of information on why choose a coaching approach for moving culture forward. One thing, it gives one-to-one engagement. Now, I did do a little bit of group coaching with them, but it was generally one-to-one engagement. I always say this whenever I do any education on change management with people. 12 5-minute one-on-one conversations are worth far more than one 60-minute conversation with a group of 12 people, because you hear what everybody has to say. You don't have the 3 dominant characters that everybody else nodding dog goes behind them and goes, yes, that's what I think. And this is part of the benefit of coaching one-on-one. You hear what everybody's feeling, what everybody's experiencing. It allows people to feel and take ownership of where they're going forward. The actual person who I coached with was actually taking ownership and responsibility to go forward with the action plans that we developed. Everything was confidential and personal. I will be totally honest with you. The first probably 4 sessions I had with every single person that I coached was more counseling and psychotherapy than actually coaching, because they were so feeling hard done by. They were so upset with the way they'd been treated for so many years that they just wanted to go bleh and tell me all about it. You know, it's a bit like we do when we meet in these circles and these things, and we tell everybody, oh, I'm going through this, oh, I'm going through this, and that whole stuff comes up. The people that I coached were all the newly created middle managers and first-line managers, the roles that had never existed before in the organization. This was not about changing the previous management style, because there wasn't any. It was directive, you do what I tell you to do. The 2 sons had come in and they put these management levels into the organization. So these were my focus points. This was my change agent network in the organization for changing the culture. So I used a coaching approach with them. It also, as part of that coaching approach, my last point on here, it actually helped them to develop coaching skills for their staff, because they were dealing with staff who were feeling quite raw at times. They had scars, they had hurting points. So what did I do? What did I action? How did I work this? The coaching approach I took, because I didn't want to get into anything too complex, was the Common Grow model. Anybody who's had any experience in coaching will probably find this familiar. It's a cycle of exploration, that looks at where do you want to get to, how you're going to get there, what are the different ways of getting there, and what happens when you do get there. But I put a little bit of a twist on this, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. And this is your other template that you have on your table. I'm going to talk you through this, and then you're going to practice this at your table. So you have a way of taking this away as a practice tool for you to use going forward. First of all, in the dry wording of this model, it says, what is your goal? That's not really inspiring to anybody, is it? So I twisted it and I said, if you had a magic wand, what would you like to do? Channel your inner Harry Potter. And with my accent, I can get away with that as well. So, what would you want to do? Then, what is currently happening? So I tried to spice it up as best I can and said, so what steps are you taking now to make this goal happen? So maybe think about what's your journey that you're trying to go on now? What's your vehicle that you're trying to look for? Can you afford it? A whole other conversation. Then when you consider options, rather than the boring what options are available to you, start to put a little bit of things around constraints and boundaries in here. I actually used the hurdle example. What do you need to do to jump over your hurdles? What are your hurdles? What is it that you need to make this happen? What do you need to go gathering? And finally, the will. How will you make this happen? Yay! So, what will you do to achieve this goal? What is your motivator? What's motivating you? I love to actually flip this and put the motivation word in here. Because for me, this is where you will get people moving forward with any sort of activity. So when we're talking about coaching, using the GROW model, there's no point in going through the activity over and over again if you're not actually going to get to something at the end. So you need to find that spark that motivates the person so that they can get to their end point. So that's why I put a little picture of a target up there. Be focused on a target. Don't just go for some random, well, as long as it's better than where I am now, that's a success. No, it's not. That's just hiding. So now it's over to you, which is where I suggest anybody who's hiding in the back row comes and finds a table to work with somebody, because now you unfortunately need to talk to people. I know this is a rare thing in change management, this whole conversation stuff, because most people are just like, send an email, they'll understand. Doesn't matter if it's 16 pages long, they'll understand it. Conversation, for me, is the biggest win of any change approach. And conversation is at the core of coaching. So what I want you to do is think about a change event that you want to have happen with yourself. Maybe you want to change careers. Maybe you want to grow your career. Maybe you want to develop your learning, your skills, your understanding of something. Something where you want to move from A to B, where you want to go from your own current state to a future state. Have a little think about that, and then find a willing victim on your table who is going to be your coach for the next 14, 15 minutes, say, and then swap. So what we're going to do is, probably because of timing, we're going to do about 6-7 minutes each way in that 15-minute slot. So those of you hiding at the back, move forward, come into the fold. You're allowed. Nobody's going to bite you. Nobody's going to give you anything that is going to scare you afterwards. But come into the fold. Do we understand this task? Yes? Shaking heads works. Thank you. I'll come and tour the floor while we're doing this to make sure everybody's good. I appreciate the dynamic conversations. Ideal opportunity for who you can actually have lunch with now. If you have more conversation to go, there's plenty of time over lunch, and I know I'm fighting with you between now and lunch, so I get it. I get it. All right, folks. I'll get some general feedback comments on that side of things in a moment, but I just wanted to share one more slide on where we are now with the company. So the company is actually settled pretty well. Unfortunately, the company has decided that their next tactic is going to be eating up other companies. So at the moment, this year, it's on target to break through 1,000 employees, and probably in the next 2 years, about 2,000 employees. But part of the success and part of the ability to deal with that has been their middle management team now feel much more confident to be able to nurture, encourage, empower, and enable their staff. Because that challenge that they had before has taken probably 2.5 years to come out of the system. And I'm due to do another assessment later this year with them, which is where I'm still engaged. Yeah.
So where in the last 2.5 years, where did they actually improve on their chart and where are they still lacking?
That's what I was going to say. I'm due to do an assessment with them probably going to be about August, September time of this year, because I wanted to make sure it was a full 3-year cycle that went through on this stuff. I can tell you where I think they've improved is I think they've definitely improved on having strategy, because they didn't have one before. They just did and hoped for the best. Their strategy was whatever the man says. And that was it. Whereas now, for the very first time last year, they actually had a leadership team retreat and strategic planning session. It was damn hard work, but they did get to play with Lego during it. So that was cool for them. But we did do some work last year with them. I would say, for me personally, I still think their learning and development is not quite there, because there's still all their learning and development is about skills-based activity relative to the production line, not that, should we say, softer skills development. I've managed to get some of the leadership team to take some of that stuff, but, baby steps, I think, has got to be accepted with them on this front. But it's kind of scary and good scary at the same time, how quickly this company has grown. And, I had a conversation only, 3 weeks back with the CEO, who I'm also trying to persuade not to be CEO, but that's a whole other story, because just because he's the son doesn't mean he's best placed to be the CEO. But I actually had a conversation with him, and he's like, I'm now doing the job that this job should be doing, not just reacting to everything that comes my way, because that was the way my dad used to do it. Yeah? Sure.
So apart from the coaching, what type of change initiatives did you implement to get them through this period last year?
Oh, gosh. We did resiliency training. We did a lot of work on helping them to build personal and organizational resilience. We did some activity with them on sponsorship, because they were also, just to throw it in at the same time, they also introduced an ERP system for the first time ever into the company, just because they thought that would be fun to do at the same time. So they had a project manager who just didn't get change management, so I had a little education session there. And then the other things I've done as well is I've been helping them generally in terms of what I would call communication lines. I've actually been helping them to map out where they should be expecting information to be coming from to say how well the business is going, who reports where and all that, around the org design side of things to a certain extent. I've done a lot of work with that. That's still a bit of a work in progress because every time we start to get somewhere close to something we settle on, they go out and buy another company and try and slot it in. And then it's kind of playing catch up a bit on that front. So yeah, lots of other things as well. One interesting thing I will say as a client, it's not been a full-time client. It's probably been about a 50% client. That 50% has sometimes gone to 100%, and then other times it's been down to 1 day a week, just because you have to leave them the space to recover between things. So this is so now all the questions. You're not allowed anymore. No. But we've only got a few minutes left. This is my contact information. If anybody wants to ask me anything at any time, I'm always willing to share. I'm not protective of anything. Anybody who knows me knows that I'll share my insights and information with anybody, even if they don't like my opinion on it. But if you're interested in any more information or any other stuff on the tools I've shown you today, you want to get templates of your own or anything like that, just get in touch with me. I'll get that stuff out to you. I'm going to try and see if we can open up on the app to get the actual 2 templates you've had available on the app for you as well. If you want them physically, we've got spare copies here as well, because I kind of got printed 600 or something. So, there's plenty of paper ones here if you want to take some as well. Anything else you want to talk about this, or you're going through a particular experience as well, always happy to have a conversation. I've been playing in this change space for over 25 years. It's actually this year, it'll be 27 years that I've been doing change since it didn't have the label. So I was very keen, you can't see the actual label there, to put the been there, done it, because there's not much I ain't seen. But thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you for making it so easy, because you did all the work for me. So thank you.